Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope this is working. You might tell me you have the audio twice. If you do, let me know and I'll turn something off. I forgot to fix OBS this week for the live streaming. And as such, as you can see, the live chat still isn't behaving correctly. So I apologize for that. I completely forgot about it until I went to set it up for tonight's stream. And I went, oh, bugger, that's not working. Hello, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I've gone live a little bit earlier because Bardwell is not on, I don't think. If Bardwell is on, I'm in trouble. I know he was on. No, he wouldn't be on now. I'm probably in trouble anyway. Look, the reality is, hello, I hope you are all safe and well. This week, we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about Chris Ross's first battery testing video out. It is super interesting. I'm really looking forward to the rest of these. Don't worry, there's no controversy. I'm not going to sit here and complain about Chris doing battery testing. Actually, I just want to sort of highlight it because it is a really interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results of the testing when we start moving up into 4S, 6S packs of the size that we all traditionally do. So we're going to talk a bit about that. We're also going to talk about a bit of a rabbit hole, actually, and a product called Prosite HD, because it is an FPV system that launched in 2015, and it is a digital FPV system nonetheless. And actually, what's very interesting about it is based on the same method of video transmission as HDZero uses today, which is joint source channel coding. And the real interesting thing I want to talk about is, why did Prosite HD from Amion fail? Because they had an enormous head start on everyone. And whilst DJI was absolutely making digital FPV in their consumer drones, they didn't actually have a standalone solution until 2017 when they released the OcuSync Air system and the Goggles RE, which I reviewed, I talked about on this channel. I was actually part of the beta team for that, and I helped develop it a little bit with DJI and help feedback. And then in 2019, we had the big bang when DJI landed, and then HDZero appeared as Shark Bite with Fat Shark. So I want to talk a little bit about the history of digital FPV, because it is super interesting. And actually, if anyone is watching this and you have a Prosite HD kit that you would like to lend me, please do reach out, because I would love to take a look at that in comparison to where we're at today. And Floor Flyer has already said it failed because the manufacturer failed to develop it further or support after release. Yeah, and there's a lot of history about this that I remember at the time, and I have had to do a bit of digging and a bit of remembering of what was going on at the time. But we will touch on it because it's interesting. And we're going to talk about, as always, any subject that you guys bring up. And I will just do a bit of an update on the China ban in a minute too. And we'll talk a little bit about DJI O3 latency, because this is still something that confuses a lot of people. I do have a video coming on it. I'm going to show you guys a little bit of a first look at some data, although I'm doing a bit more rechecking of this data before the video goes out from a publishing point of view. I just want to make sure I've dotted the I's and T'd the T's, because there's some interesting results as well. Now, it has been a rather quiet week in FPV. I know a lot of people were expecting a release this week. Nothing to see here. I wouldn't personally be expecting anything for about another 2 weeks, but I could be wrong on that. Obviously, there is a lot of anticipation about what might be coming next from Walksnail, but it's also interesting because it might not be over for the likes of DJI and others as well, and let's see what comes around the corner. Now, as always, if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat. I'll try and answer them. I'm not going to say hello to everyone. I can see Carl B is here. I can see Londeno, Dispander, Darkman. Hello to everyone who's here. How many have we got? We got 74 already. That's brilliant. That's cool. So what I'm going to do is just touch on the easy subjects first. I do have a cup of tea. Let me get to the overhead. Just to give you a barometer of color on the tea today. That is the color of today's tea. That's at least 2 passes through the bodily system color. Sugar, always have at least 1.5 sugars. The biscuits tonight on tap are chocolate digestives, the same pack as last week. Builder's tea, absolutely. That is the color of choice today, with skimmed milk. We'll come back to that. I do like a good builder's tea. What bag? I always forget which bag it is. It's the pyramid bag. Been flying this weekend? Yeah, I have been flying today. I've been finishing up some reviews on 2 drones, which I've just been on stop for, actually. I have a 3rd quad I'm waiting to finish a review on. The 3rd one is the iFlight Defender 16. Just so you guys understand, I did show the Defender 16 on the channel, and there's a reason the video hasn't come out yet, and that is because the props that were originally supplied with the review samples are all exploding, and I'm waiting for a new set of props. Now, this is, I believe, a thing that's only affected the review samples or some early owners. If you do have a Defender 16 and your props are exploding, just reach out to iFlight and they should sort you out. So I can't finish. Oh, I have literally just broke this one in my fingers. This prop was a full-size prop. It was fine. Sorry, not full-size. It was not broken. And literally, it just disintegrated in my fingers. Just to give you an idea, they're just breaking that easily. Now, apparently, it was a problem with the initial batch that HQ prop made. What is going to be a comment I do make in the review, which will be frustrating, is that they are a special prop for the quad made by HQ Prop for iFlight, and you've only got to have them. That's a bit of a frustration. But that review's on hold until I get a new set of props. They literally just go bang as soon as you take off. The hubs are just disintegrating. So it was a plastic issue. Apparently it's been fixed. However, I have finished my review today, or not finished the review, the flying on the Flylens 85. I really like that quad. Suffers from a little bit of jello on O3 in the sun, but not particularly bad. No vibrations, though, out of the sun. Really a nice quad. A little bit floaty. It's a little bit hard to keep where you want it to go, being a whoop. You know what whoops are like. They do like to drift around a little bit. But I actually really like the Flylens 85. My video will be coming out on that in the next few days. Literally nothing I can complain about on that quad. Looks like the symptoms using Loctite. Yeah, I know. It does actually. It's almost identical. Yeah. I've then finished flying the F4. I haven't had a lot of... The weather's been horrible, but it's suddenly been good. I finished flying the F4, the Nazgul F4. That is a loud quad. Just like the F6, it is a loud quad, but I do like the F4 on 6S. Some really good... No screws. These are push-on props. So there's no screws involved, no Loctite involved. They are push-on. It's a loud quad, but I do like the F4. I actually like it a little... I like 4-inch quads more than I like 5-inch quads. And the Nazgul F4, I think, is a nice size overall. I guess a good flight time on it, on 1100 milliamp hour 6S is some decent flight time, but it is loud. Though the props on it are loud. Hello, Michael. Hope you are well. I was recommended this by YouTube, and I have no idea why, but I'm dropping in to say hi and good luck on your stream. Thank you. I appreciate that. Same flight stack as they're using on the F5. It's the same flight stack on the F4. It is basically the same quad, except a smaller frame, smaller motors, smaller props. So it's not the same quad remotely. Same electronics. They still have the soft start switch, same flight stack, same flight controller and ESC. Exactly the same. The Success F7. Exactly the same. But there's no buzzer, there's no LED lights, 3D printed sides. But it's a nice quad. It flies nicely. It does fly nicely. But yeah, that review will be coming out. I've done a teardown on it as well to show you. Not be a great amount of flight time. And then when I get some new props, I will eventually talk about the Defender 16. Because I can't until I get props. Okay, so before we get into it, I just want to say, if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat when we get a gap. Super chats are welcome, but they're not required for me to answer a question. I will always answer a question without a super chat. If you do want to support the channel, though, super chats are available. Now, the first thing I want to quickly talk about is, or highlight really more than anything, is this. And this is It Begins, and this is Chris Ross's first battery testing video. Now, if you don't know the history on this, right, let me just... Hi there, everyone. With some... mute the thing. Chris has been sent by JB this West Mountain Radio computerized battery analyzer. I don't know anything about this device. Now, for people who have followed my Discord, you will know that we were talking about how to do battery testing, and this isn't the way I was going to do it. I come up with my own way, but I'm not saying Chris is wrong. I was thinking of a way of doing it with actual motors and props braked in a board with an Arduino programmed to control a flight controller to put it through a simulated flight. Was what I was thinking of. But Chris has been sent this thing from JB. Don't really know much about it. And he started doing some Whoop battery testing. It is very interesting. The results have a few interesting outcomes, but pretty much everything turns out where you would expect it to be. The highest C battery, I think it was, came out the best, which sort of makes sense. Although there is a newbie drone battery in there, which is kicking the ass of all of the others. However, what I would say is, and this is the bit I'm not convinced about on battery testing, and this is nothing to do with Chris's video. I'm not sure, as a pilot, you wouldn't come to the conclusions on this anyway. through the feel of how long the battery lasts, through how it sags, through, you know, that side of things. I guess what it does is give you an indication of what to avoid, really, more than anything. But it really is very interesting. So if you're interested in seeing the process, he's got some very nice data charts in here. I'm not going to spoil the whole video. I want people to go and watch it, but he does have some really nice charts and stuff. And I think Chris has done a great job on it. I did just see someone's comment. So in a couple of months, Chris will release his own Whoop battery. Well played, Sir. I'm going to stick away from that this week. I have spoke to Chris this week, not on the phone. We messaged back and forth on some stuff. I'm hoping to have a catch up with him in the next week or so. I've been so busy, I just haven't had a chance. But yeah, look, it's worth a look. It is absolutely worth a look. And I look forward to seeing some of the 5 and 6S battery testing. For me, what will actually be interesting, I keep saying interesting. For me, what would be nice to see is there actually as much in this as we think, or is everything really going to turn out to be about the same or okay? So is it going to be like, here's a load of data, and the reality is there's like 5% in it? And the reality, is it worth it for that 5% unless you're a racer? That's where, you know, if you're someone who wants to get every single milliamp hour compared to weight, and that's a very interesting measure, and Chris has that in his charts, that is where it's going to be very, very interesting for racing pilots. So what battery is going to give you the most bang for buck per gram? And that is a chart that Chris does do in the video as well, which is quite cool. But for the average pilot, what will be interesting is the highest, the best battery going to be the battery that costs the most? Because again, there is always a payoff in price versus performance. And this somewhat falls into the motor category as well. And me and Chris were talking about his motors this week, actually. And I believe he's going to send me a set to have a look at. Something high-end that costs more, you'd expect the best performance. What you're really looking for, what the average Joe is looking for, of all of these batteries that say cost under $20, which one is the best? Not this $32 battery is the best you can buy. And that's where I think it's important for motors, and I think it's important for batteries as well. Especially when you might be buying 10, 20 packs at a time, and you might have a 3 to 4% loss on these packs, but if they're £3 a pack cheaper and you're buying 20 of them, that's £60 or $60. So that is something that's going to have a real financial impact in people's pockets. And the very best is not necessarily worth it. What you're often looking for is, what is the very best battery for my price range, if that makes sense. And that's where I'm really looking forward to the data. But the video's out. Do check it out. He's got his testing methodology in there. All looks good. You know, literally zero. The data looks, great. I think testing methodology looks fine. You know, I didn't agree with some of the power testing just because of the matter-of-fact way of it and the difficulties of power testing. But I think on the batteries, this just looks great. Looking forward to it. Lasts a decent amount of time. Yeah, and that's very hard to quantify, Tom. Tom has said it's not just about performance. You also want something that will last a decent amount of time. And what Chris is doing is he's running what he's saying is an open door battery policy. So anyone who wants to send him a battery, he will test it, but it has to be brand new. And the real question then is, when you start going, okay, this battery is the best, but would it be the best after 30 cycles? That's the next question. And, you know, that is going to be very hard to test without a huge amount of time involved. Huge amount of time. Can you imagine having to cycle 10 batteries 30 times? That's a mammoth task. That needs to be an automated process, but you couldn't leave it, because you can either automate it, but it's a dangerous process because you've got to discharge, recharge, discharge, recharge. It's a lot of work to do that. You could automate it, but even the time scale involved to do that. And what's the, how regularly are we cycling them? Are you just going to cycle 30 batteries twice a day? Are you going to do it over 3 months? Remember, you might fly your packs 2 times a weekend. Cycling them will behave completely different if you just did 30 in a row. There's a huge amount to throw into this, so it's not going to be a simple... I could cycle a battery at 50 times in a row from brand new, and it might be brilliant. You then put that in someone's real world usage of it being cycled 3 times on every weekend over a 6-month period, that may give very, very different results. And how that battery's been treated. Has it been always stored at, say, 3.85? Temperature. Someone's just beat me to... Flowfly just beat me to it. Temperature. Has the battery been left charged for 3 days? Has it been left discharged for 3 days? It's a very complicated thing to do, and I'm not sure where the middle ground is on any of that. What's the drain rate? Yeah, exactly. This is a very complicated subject, and when I was thinking about this on Discord, there was 50% of me which was, don't even consider doing this, because I'm not sure how valuable the data will really be. It remains to be seen. Chris could show something that blows our minds. I'm not sure. I am expecting high C expensive batteries to be, in general, better than low C cheaper batteries. And that's probably where things will end up overall. And there will be some outliers. There'll be probably a GMB pack, which is crap, because in my experience they are. But yeah, we're going to have to see. The only thing I'll complain about is there were far too many GMB packs in Chris's video for my liking. I would not have that many GMB packs within 100 foot of my workshop. I'm sorry, but no. Not based on my personal experience. I think they're okay in small quads, but I've had GMB packs go up too many times. Full size 4S's I've had go up 13 or 1500 milliamp hours. I am just one man, but I can only go by my experience. I have GMB packs here for the whoops, because they're the only ones I could get. It's interesting, but it's a complicated subject. Okay, so Chris's video is out. Please check it out. It is super interesting. Really, really is interesting. Look forward to seeing what comes next. Okay, now, the next subject I'm going to touch on quickly is DJI O3 latency. Now, I do have a video coming on this. Now, this video is based on my own in-house testing. I'm doing a lot of latency testing with a 1,000 frames a second camera. So all tests are done by me, physically recording at 1,000 frames a second. And what we're doing is we're looking at all of the O3 modes on DJI Goggles 2 and V2, and I've done some comparison with other systems as well. Now, I have done probably over 300 test runs now on this, and it is a complicated subject, and the data should not be taken as absolute fact. And I am going to show you a chart in a minute. And what I mean by that is there is run-to-run variance, which I have averaged. So what we are talking about in this data is as follows. We look for what is the first pixel. And when I say first pixel, that is the first change on the display. It won't be 1 pixel. It'll always be a section of the image on DJI FPV because of the way it works. It's not like HDZero where you could actually have a single pixel appear. And then what is the time to a full frame? So that full image reading through onto the display. Okay. And then what we're doing is averaging all of the runs and giving you the numbers of those runs. But what I am also doing is giving you the lowest first pixel number that I got. And why that's important is as follows. That is the lowest latency that I have seen in that mode, period. So let's say I did 100 runs and the lowest first pixel was 20 milliseconds, but that average was 30 milliseconds. The data will include the lowest first pixel of 20 milliseconds, the average first pixel, and then the average full frame. And that's how the data is going to be laid out. Now, with DJI O3, depending on when the image comes on the display and where the goggles are in the refresh rate, there can be a huge variance in latency. A dramatic difference in latency. And just to give you some ideas, because this is some of my writings down from when I was doing it, in the same mode, right? So just to give you an idea, at 4K 30, right, you can have it take anywhere from 36 milliseconds to 51 milliseconds for the first pixel to show. And that is because the refresh rate of the goggle is not aligned to the refresh rate of the camera. And as such, the readout from the camera is buffered until it gets to the correct spot. So you may do 10 runs and you might get like a 20 milliseconds, a 28, a 26, a 21. And this is because the camera's read in is not synchronized to the goggles readout. And as such, they are constantly moving around. And there is a point, for instance, and we'll look at the chart now, that the camera may be starting its next readout here, but the goggle is already here. So the goggle will then move in the last frame, and as this reads down, it has to go all the way past the last frame back to the start before it reads in the frame that the camera has just taken. So there is always this option for it to actually be, yes, I have to do it manually. I'll talk about that. But there's always the possibility that you will have up to almost 1 full frame of delay as a result of the refresh rate. But that may not be a full frame. It may actually just be a full refresh of the display rate delay, which is slightly complicated. How are you measuring the times from your 1,000 processor manually? Yes, it is horribly manual, unfortunately. But yeah, this is a very complicated subject. If DJI synchronized, and they don't, if they synchronized the camera and the goggles readout to be the same, you would then have the ultimate stability in latency on the system. But the problem is they're not synchronized. So depending at what point the display is reading out to your eyes, and at what point the camera is actually reading out, will depend on when that image hits the display. And it can be a huge gap. It can be massive, absolutely massive. So what I'm going to do is give you a preview of the chart. But again, I want to be stressing, I want to go back over this data before it is fully confirmed. I wouldn't expect too much. Would it help to turn both devices on at the same time? No. No, it's because they're just out of sync. They're just out of sync. There's just no way. DJI would have to send a synchronizing signal to do it. And it even gets a bit more complicated on the V2s because the V2 displays are running at different frame rates as well. And remember, the chances are DJI are not synchronizing the goggles refresh rate to the camera readout or the frame rate. So for instance, even at 30 frames a second, the goggles are probably, and we don't know for sure because it's almost impossible to tell, the goggles are still refreshing at 100 hertz. Because their chances are, and I've not confirmed this, I need to check it, but they will still be reading the displays out at a different rate. So it just gets all very, very complicated. Now, if we look at the numbers, this is the chart that shows the numbers. Now, this is going to be quite hard for me to show you. Tested also V2. V2 is done as well. So this is in order, and this is in order of lowest full frame latency. Okay, so just to explain what we've got on the charts here, and I'm going to zoom in a minute to show you. Let me go in to show you some stuff. So if we start at the bottom end, okay, let's get in and start at the bottom end. So the blue box is the lowest, sorry, the blue box is the average first pixel, the average of every run, and I'm doing equal runs. I want to do a few more. At the moment, this chart is based on an average of 10 runs, but I have actually done more, so I need to adjust this. But that is the average amount of time in milliseconds to get the first pixel. The red bar is the average to the full frame. And the green bar is the lowest first pixel result that I have had in all of the runs. So the fastest system with regards to latency is the V2 goggles with the Vista in low latency mode. Now, I just want to clarify this. The Vista is the same as the Air unit. I'm only using a Vista for my test. It's no different. Okay? But I'm labeling it as Vista. Okay? 18 milliseconds to the first pixel lowest point, average of 20, 30 milliseconds on average to the full frame. Next is Avatar HD, really close. Now, what I will say is this, when you do look at Avatar HD, Avatar does look a little bit more stable overall in the numbers. Latency is a little bit higher than what DJI can absolutely do, but it is very close, 20 to 24 milliseconds. No one in their right mind is going to feel that. Really, really quite decent. V1 will be the same as the V2. Yes, it will. Exactly the same. I've just labeled it V2, but V1, V2. Then we have the goggles 2 in O3 mode at 100 frames a second. But what is interesting is the jump in latency compared to the other two systems. They are higher. We knew it would be. It's only 100 frames. Because remember, this is 120 frames a second, low latency mode. It is longer. Then is the V2s on O3 at 120. Now, this is the bit I want to go and do some more checking on, because I actually expected the V2s on O3 on 120 mode to actually be lower latency than the Goggles 2 at 100. DJI actually specify auto channel mode, as always, on this. DJI actually specify in their spec the average latency mode is 30 milliseconds for O3 on Goggles 2 and 28 milliseconds for the V2, and they actually say it's lower. However, in my tests, the V2 at 120 is coming out a little bit higher, and this is why I want to go back and just do some more testing. It is possible that over a larger run-to-run variant on this, that gap will swap around, and that's why I want to do some more testing. We then have the V2 goggles with the Vista in high latency mode. We then have the V2 O3 in 60 frames a second mode. It isn't really a surprise that the V2 O3 in 100 frames a second mode is higher than 60. It's worth remembering that the refresh rate on the V2 goggles is 144 hertz or 120 hertz. 100 is a funny refresh rate for those goggles. I'm not shocked those two are so close. I think it's not surprising. What is interesting when I look at the numbers on this is there are some real delays in how long it takes for the full image to come in on this. DJI seem to be doing something a little bit odd on the V2s in 100 frames a second mode. It's not right, I don't think, and they're doing something odd. And then if we continue up the chart, and let me just bring it down. Actually, I'm going to zoom out a touch. We then get all the way up to the horrible modes, right, at the top end, which is the very worst mode. And I'm going to turn me off so you can see it. 1 second. The very worst mode is without doubt Goggles 2 O3 30 frames a second. It is horrific. You can be upwards of an average of 70, nearly 70 milliseconds. And Goggles 2 O3 at 120 as well is also horrible. But again, those goggles can't do 120 frames a second. I suspect it's some strange mode that DJI are instigating to just allow 120 frames a second on Goggles 2. And then you can see we've also got Avatar HD in there as well. Avatar HD 60 1080p mode is pretty much where we expected. This is why I'll be repairing my Vista after they're killed off. It's the best, hands down. For latency, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, there should be no surprise that the V2 in Vista is the lowest. Okay, let me just turn back on NVIDIA. Boom. Because the pipeline on O3 is longer. DJI have a bigger pipeline for the video processing, for the recording. As a result of that, it isn't a surprise that O3 has higher latency. Really, if you want the absolute lowest latency on O3, it's 100 frames a second on the Goggles 2, 120 on the V2s. That's it, period. Lowest latency. Every other mode is not great. I haven't got HDZero in this chart yet. HDZero will be coming in the future. O3 is 840. O3 is 840p on the V2s. Because the V2s are 840p, not 720. But we don't know what resolution DJI transmit at. But what I will say is this. The V2s have no onboard processing. There's going to be no downscaling in the V2s. So DJI are most likely transmitting at 810p as well. The V2s don't have enough power for video processing. There's no onboard. I very much doubt they're transmitting 1080p over the air because there's not enough processing power in the V2s to downscale, in my opinion. There's just nothing in it. The V2s are taking what they've got and pumping it out. There's no media processor in there. There's no nothing. I suspect the over-the-ear is 810p. And that would explain the extra latency. Yes, 100%. Yeah. It's being messed around with. What is clear is O3 is still not where the original system was. And Avatar HD is very comparable to DJI. Overall, very comparable. So O3 makes the difference by itself, which goggles you're using. Absolutely. Yeah. If you want the lowest latency on O3, period, in theory, according to my data so far, is there any added latency? No, there isn't. No added latency by recording. No, I've done a test on that. Everything's the same. The pipeline just splits. So. You're right. In fact, I believe the resolution was higher using DJI FPV than it was the Vista. Yes, that's correct, Lon. So the Vista and the ear unit on the V2s is 720p. The FPV drone was 840p. Or was it 810? I think it's 810p, not 840. Sorry, I'm saying 840 because someone mentioned it in the chat. I don't think it's 840. I think it's 810. If we look on the, I'm 99% it's 810p. And that, but if you remember, the FPV drone looked amazing. Yeah, 810. I thought it was. Sorry, I was saying 840, 810. It looked amazing. It really did. Very cool. So, look, I don't want any these on. I want to do more testing because there's some numbers here that don't add up. The way I've done it is absolutely fine. The issue is I want to do some more run-to-runs. What I'm noticing on the V2 data, and let me just show you this so you have an understanding. What I'm seeing on the run-to-runs on the V2s in 120 is there's a long time before the first pixel kicks in. The first pixel is what's causing the biggest delay on the V2s at 120. If you look at the first pixel latency, right, it's 28 lowest. That is where the V2s are struggling, is because the first pixel is so far out. And as a result of the first pixel being delayed so far, the rest of the image is being delayed. What I also noticed as well in the V2 in 120 mode is the image is always appearing in the same place, predominantly in the middle, just below the middle, which is strange. Now, for those who don't know, the way the V2 goggles read out is they read out in two halves of the screen. You don't actually see lines come in half by half. What you actually get is one chunk of data come in and then the next chunk of data come in. And I'll show you this now. It is odd the way it works. It really is odd the way the V2s work. Now, we've always known about this on the V2s. It's nothing particularly new. Now, if I make this smaller and make that bigger so you guys can see it, 2 seconds, and then we'll put this up on the screen. So, desktop. Okay, so we're in Resolve Studio, and what I'm going to show you is how we're actually measuring the latency. So this is a full 1000 frames a second recording, okay? Now, let me just find one of these I can show you. Let me just bring in something. 149 latency testing V2 4K 120, and let me dragging this one. Let me just check what's the frame rate on this timeline. That's fine. 54.95. That's fine. Cool. It needs to be 50. Was that 60 frames a second? Oh, God. Yeah, right. Sorry, let me try a new timeline. Because if it's not right, it won't behave. There we go. Okay. Change. Thank you. Right. So the timeline now refresh rate matches. So let me just show you. So what you're seeing here in the display is on. Let me just find the right point. Boom. Okay. There. Okay. So the way the setup works is there is two LEDs that come on at exactly the same time. One pointed into the lens of the camera on the system, and one pointed in to the lens of the camera that is looking at the goggles. So the camera is looking at the display on the goggles, which is the camera view of an LED. There is a second LED in the lens of the camera, which is tied to the first LED. So both LEDs come on at exactly the same time. As a result of that, what you do is measure the time difference between the first LED coming on and the second LED coming on. And that time difference is the latency of the system. So just to show you this now, I'm going to step forward one frame, and that red light you can see in the corner is the LED coming on in the camera lens. So no light, light. At this point, both LEDs have come on at exactly the same time, and the LED that you can see there in the middle, that LED there in the camera lens, has illuminated, and as a result of that, we're now going to measure the time difference between the two changing, and that time difference is the latency. So that's come on. Each frame, this is recorded at 1,000 frames a second. So just to give you the inspector view, you can see up top, 50 frames a second, but it's 1,000 frames a second. It's set to 50 frames a second record rate, because you've got to set a record rate, but every frame is 1,000 frames a second. Okay, 1 millisecond. So what we do is we count from this point forward until we see a change on the display. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So that's 20 milliseconds. Nothing yet. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. Boom. 27, 28. 27, 28. This is the first change coming in. Now, look at the point this appears, right? So this is the first piece of data being shown on the display that is picked up by the camera. So 28 milliseconds. 29, 30, 31. Now it's getting brighter as the camera's picking it up. 32, 33, 34. And now you're starting to see the readout come down back from the top. So if you look here, the display is reading from this middle point down onwards, which is 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. We're then coming back down the bottom and back round the top because, remember, the camera is not synchronized. 35, 36, and actually, I'd argue 37 is the full frame. 36, you can still see a line. 37, 36, 35, 34, 33, 32, 31, 30, 29, 28. 28 is so 28 is the first pixel. It's not one pixel, but it is the first piece of information that you're seeing on the display. And then we come straight through to the full amount of data, which you see there. So that is how the testing is done. What you're measuring is the time difference between that first LED kicking in. What is interesting, though, when you look at this is how DJI V2 goggles read the data in. It is always this bottom half of the display comes on first and then generally reads down from the top. Now, the problem with this is, if you think that's where's 28? That's 28 milliseconds, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37. Okay, so is the fade... The fade is because the camera's AGC is kicking in a little bit as well. I didn't fix the ISO on these runs. It doesn't change anything. The reason it looks faded is that's more down to the AGC on the camera kicking in and the AGC on the the drone side kicking in. If I really wanted to make it just look solid white, I would fix the ISO and everything just to stop it changing. It doesn't change anything on the numbers, and that's why you get that more faded look to it. Because what it actually will do is brighten up and then it will fade down. You can actually see it fading down. That's the AGC kicking in, that fade down there. But what is always interesting is the way the V2s read in. The V2s always read in from this bottom half of the display and then from the top. Every single time. Now, the interesting thing is if you're flying, right, and something you want to see is in this area here, you're going to get that in 27, 28 milliseconds. Okay? So say a branch appears here in this frame. You're going to see that in 27, 28 milliseconds. However, if a branch appeared up here in the top half of the frame, you would be waiting 36 to 37 milliseconds before that piece of the image was actually displayed to you. So it's even as complicated as where in your field of view is the change that is going to affect your flight. Where in your field of view is the bit that you want to see first should something happen? Because it's not as simple as it just going bang on the display. The display is read out in two halves. Now, the Goggles 2 don't behave like this. The Goggles 2 actually behave a little bit differently. If I just find a Goggles 2 test, O3 100, this should be a Goggles 2 test here. This is I think this is one of the Goggles 2 tests. Let me just find it just to see if I can show you how the Goggles 2 reads out. This actually isn't one of the tests. This is me actually doing testing because I'm not actually armed at this point. Low power mode. Something I will add is this. On the O3 as well. Low power mode turning off and armed gives you the same latency. Whilst you don't get the same power output, you don't get the same latency. Okay, sorry. You don't get the same power output, you do get the same latency. So you can actually test O3 just by turning off low power mode. You don't actually have to arm. I've done all the checks on that. It's exactly the same numbers. But if I show you how the Goggles 2 read out, just as a matter of interest, just so you can see. This is an old one. This was an early test. Right, so there again, we've got the LED appearing in the side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Now, if you note it, 23, 24, 25, 26. Now, look how the Goggles 2 read in. Because the display behaves differently, the Goggles 2 read in like a complete refresh, look. From the top to the bottom, all the way down. Unlike the V2s that read in the bottom half and top half every time. The Goggles 2 read down definitely more linearly because of the OLEDs. It's a much better behavior on the Goggles 2, the display. Someone just asked, what happens if you flip the camera? Change the image in settings. No, it's exactly the same. It's the readout of the display is bottom to top. I asked about low power mode on your OG video. Yeah, low power mode with regards to latency doesn't affect anything. Low power mode and armed, low power mode off and armed. Behave the same with regards to latency. It's just RF power. So there's a lot of interesting data here, but the very basics are, is the readout synchronized to the camera reading? No, it isn't, and that is the problem with all systems. There is no synchronization between the readout and reading at all. The only thing I'm not sure is, does Carl lock the synchronization in the 540p 90 mode? I might be wrong, but I can't remember, but I swear Carl mentioned something on HDZero that he may be synchronizing the camera to goggle display readout in 540p 90, and that's what gets him the 14 milliseconds of latency. On the V2 Vista, latency is affected by low power. Yeah. Yes. Well, low power mode on will always affect the latency. What the difference is turning off low power mode on the Vista and O3 gives you the same latency as arming. What you don't have on the Vista and air unit on the V2 goggles, turning off low power mode gave you full power. Basically, turning off low power mode on the air unit and Vista on the V2s and V1s is the same as arming. That isn't the case on O3. I vaguely remember seeing something about where HDZero is synchronizing. Yeah, I have a feeling Carl is synchronizing the camera readout in 540p 90 to the goggles displays, and that's what's getting him the 14 milliseconds. Because it will. Because what you're not having to do is wait for a buffer. King kicked the channel. All right, Amadio, I got to give some attention. Doesn't leave me, I think, FPV more than here. Stay safe, my friend. Thank you. Hello, Andy RC. I just realized you're here. How are you, my friend? It is a massively complicated subject. Don't lose too much sleep out of it. The most important thing to understand here is, what modes do I use to get the lowest latency? In O3, with the V2s, it's 120. With the goggles 2, it's 100. Everything else is going to crap all over you. That's all you need to know. That's it. Do I think DJI will transmit AV1 in the future? You never know. You never know. You never know. So, there will be a video on this once I do it. I just want to do some more data. We were talking about this on my Discord, and there's some... What is the latency of analog? Okay, so analog is down to the camera. Okay, so whereas in these systems, you are restricted by the system latency of the pipeline. In analog, it's fair to say that analog is probably averaging the very best around 14 milliseconds. The system in analog is less than a millisecond, but again, you still have the readout of the display. 40, but it's camera dependent. There will be analog cameras over 35, 40 milliseconds. There'll be analog cameras at sort of 14 to 20. Frame rate of analog is complicated because most analog systems are interlaced, not progressive. So, for instance, most analog systems are 60i. But what you're getting there is an interlaced display, so you're getting a full frame every 30 milliseconds or a half frame every 60 milliseconds. Because remember, interlaced is every other line. So an interlaced image is line A, line from new frame, line from last frame, line from new frame, line from last frame. So you're around that. Now, if you actually do the math, 60 frames a second, but it's not 60 frames, it's 60 fields is the correct term to use. But if you do the math, I think in it like 16.7 milliseconds or 18 milliseconds off the top of my head. The math comes out I think it's 14. Is it 14 point something? Yeah, 15, 5.94. If you say 60. So 60 divided by 1,000 divide by 60. 16.6 milliseconds. So in theory, the very best latency you will get on analog at 60 frames a second is 16.6 milliseconds. But a full new frame would actually be 30, so you'd be talking 30 to 32 milliseconds to a full frame. Yes, 30 milliseconds latency. Yeah, so that it's complicated. I am an engineer, yes. Super hard Sony sensor. Yeah, look, analog is, but in theory, there have been analog cameras that have apparently been able. Global shutter absolutely helps because you're not reading in line by line. However, a global shutter only helps in the sense of you won't get tearing in the image, or you won't get rolling shutter effect. So very briefly, a global shutter is basically like a flash gun. Boom, that's the image. But that image is still broken down line by line and then sent over the air line by line and read onto your goggles line by line, but also read onto your goggles in 60 fields a second. So every other line. So you still have half the last frame. But what you don't get with rolling shutter is the two bits never being of the same frame. What you get with a rolling shutter is there is a point where you do see the full frame, in theory, because you get the first half of the frame and the second half of the frame. Whereas on normal shutter, brain is thinking, if you think about it, it reads the whole thing out, but it only does the every other line. Then it reads the whole thing out and then does every other line from the future frame. And actually what's interesting is you never get the two halves of the same frame as a result of that. Every half is always of another frame. The two halves of the same frame never come together. Whereas in theory, with rolling shutter, they should. And that's why when you look at rolling shutter, when you look at cameras that exhibit the rolling shutter effect, if you have a straight post, it can look like that. And the reason it looks like that is half of the lines are from the last frame and half of the lines are from the next frame that your quad's already moved. And as a result, your line isn't straight. And that's why it is. Whereas with global shutter, at some point you get the full frame on the display, which was that line straight down the middle. Lamppost, telephone line, something like that. If that makes sense. Complicated and rabbit hole that you forget the way analog works. Like you see the props. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly with the props. You're seeing two bits from two different frames. And as a result, they never align. And that's why a global shutter is better. The two bits never align. Anyway, so that is that. Yes, in theory, interlaced is better for latency because what you're not doing is delaying the next readout for the last half of the first frame. You are always getting one, in theory, right, with full interlace system, with a rolling shutter top to bottom, what you're getting is the very latest half of the latest frame at all times, basically. You're never getting half of the oldest frame, is the easiest term to use. Can I run a Vista on a plane without having to arm and disarm switch and still get good range? On the V2 goggles and the V1 goggles, yes. If, though, you are using a Vista on the goggles 2 or Integra with the latest O3 firmware, you will not get full RF power unless it receives an ARM command, even by turning off low power mode. But if you're using a Vista with the V2 goggles or the V1 goggles, turning off low power mode will give you full RF output. Okay, so if you've got any questions, we'll take some now before we move on. Damn O3. Yeah, damn O3. There's loads of quirks with O3 that we still don't fully understand. There are lots of quirks with O3. I think DJI are doing some funniness with the display refresh rates as well. Just catching down on the chat. Now, we are still on a video subject, and actually it will tie us nicely in to the next subject. And I won't spend too much time on this because we've spoke quite a lot about video already. Is there something better than O3 on the way? Define better. If you want a digital FPV system that has the most VTX and the most camera options, then it's a choice between HDZero and Avatar HD. And then your next decision point is, do you want best penetration and image quality, or do you want lower latency? And that then defines you into HDZero for the lowest possible latency, or Avatar HD for better image quality, but a variable latency system. If you want the very best image quality, then it's DJI O3. If you want, it really comes down to what you want. Overall, my opinion today, and many won't agree with this, is that the best overall FPV system today is Avatar HD. And the reason I say this is as follows. It doesn't have the best image quality. It doesn't have the lowest latency. It doesn't have the best reliability. It doesn't even have the best features. But what it does have is the most available cameras, lots of VTX options, goggle and VRX option, good overall penetration, good overall image quality, reasonable latency. So if you're looking for a system that you can you break a lens on a camera and you can get a good new one, it's Avatar HD or variable latency. Now, HDZero is by far the lowest latency system, and you can change the lenses on the cameras, and it has goggles and a VRX module. But Avatar, I still think, is most people will be happier with Avatar HD over HDZero if they're not struggling with latency. I think the compromise of latency versus image quality is an interesting one. Now, I'm not talking about here DJI FPV on the V1, V2 goggles, the Caddx Vista, or the DJI Air unit. And the reason I'm not is I largely class those now as end of life. Whilst you can still buy the Vista, the camera availability is limited. You don't have the wide available that you had before. It is going to end at some point. Jason, GMI has said Walksnail is on par with Vista. I think it's like the DJI system, but with more features. And that's why you can still get a Nebula Pro. I know. It's hard for me to recommend something I know is going to become end of life at some point soon. And it's going to. It has to. But yeah, I'm actually surprised Caddx is still banging out the Nebula Pros. No, we haven't done the Prosite yet. That'll be next. Now, if you want the lowest possible latency, it's HDZero. It's without doubt. It is not even worth discussing. Fixed lowest latency HDZero. But Walksnail, I do believe overall has the best options today. Now, the problem with O3 is fantastic. If we knew the Vista was going to stay around forever, it would actually change my opinion slightly. Because I'd actually then say DJI, Because if we knew the Vista was never going away, and we knew you could always get cameras like the Nebula Pro, and we knew it was going to still work with the goggles too, like it does today, I actually would say DJI probably takes it, because what you then have is the best of both worlds. However, O3 has proprietary fixed lens cameras that you can't swap the lenses out on. It doesn't have the lowest latency, but it has by far the best image quality. It doesn't have VRX modules. It has limited VTXs. And as a result of that, it doesn't have low light cameras. Someone just said there. It's hard for me to say it is the best overall. If the Vista was staying, and I knew it was staying, and we would still have cameras, I do think it would be a lot closer between Avatar HD and DJI. But the reality is, Avatar HD has a good set of goggles. I can't knock the current goggles. The anti-fog is about the worst bit, but other than that, they do work very well. The image quality isn't the best, but it's good enough. The compression is shocking. Being honest, the more you fly it, you do realize it. But it has a lot of nice options. The VRX, it has lots of features. So it's hard for me to not say Avatar is probably the best for most people. But that isn't to say HDZero isn't a viable option. Yeah, that... London, yeah. If DJI... If tomorrow, right, we had a new one-board Vista, one-board version of the Vista with a bunch of new cameras, endgame. It's endgame DJI. And I love DJI. I'll be honest, at the moment, my preferred system is still DJI. I fly O3 on more than anything else. I don't really even fly the original system. I just fly O3 now. I will accept latency for image quality, but I'm a crap pilot, so don't, look, it depends what you're doing. At the end of the day, it really depends what you're doing. Yeah, I did see that. Pedro says, Albert Kim found a lens module for O3 for $30. Yeah, it was the whole camera assembly, but I'm not sure about this. I need to look at it a bit more. I did see that. I generally fly DJI O3 more than anything else. The image quality on O3 is just fantastic. It is so good. I was flying O3 today on the Whoop. It's just so good. It really is so good. But if I was saying to someone today who says, I want to get into freestyle, I want something that gives options, it's Avatar HD overall, unless he says, I want the lowest possible latency. And look, HDZero have made it, and look, HDZero has some inherent behaviors that for me mean Avatar is more, in my opinion, is better for most people. I think for the average pilot, a two-way compression-based latency system is the better option. And I know people won't agree, but I can tell you now, when I was doing my flight testing on the HDZero 1W VTX last week, there are places I will easily fly through with Avatar and DJI. It'll block up, but I will push on through that I cannot do on HDZero. I have a certain track in my test field that I know inside out, right? I know every inch of how far I can go with one system or another because it's just I've flown it so much. And there's a track which I flew the Avatar HD and DJI and the Avatar through the woods. I just can't do it on HDZero. But I can't even go into the corner. And what you get with HDZero is you get this instant loss of image. Whereas as much as DJI blocks up, I have enough that I can push on through. And that could be me. But I feel personally that is better for most pilots. Not all. Look, if you're going to talk about a racing pilot, throw DJI and Avatar HD out the window. It's not going to happen. You can't race. Even with this race mode they've added. Sorry, not going to happen. You know, HDZero is the F1 of FPV from a speed and latency point of view. And that's the stuff, that's the difference between losing and saving a quad. Yeah, and that's the point Prop Butcher's just mentioned. And that is it, right? So here's the difference. I put the HDZero quad into the mud, whereas I wouldn't do it with the others because I can just push on up and out the way. Whereas the HDZero, I just lost the image. It was like, boom, gone. And I'm like, oh, bugger. I'd already hit the grass. Whereas on the others, I'd have just had enough. And it's that penetration difference as a result of a two-way system is just enough. It can be just enough to get the quad through. It's not perfect. It's not perfect, but it's just enough. Now we've had my video system is better than Crossfire versus Express RS. Yeah, we're not going there. We are close to a bottleneck in the latency. It's just enough. So, anyway. Next, we're going to talk about sort of the beginnings, actually, of digital FPV, because this all goes back a very long way. Digital FPV has been around since about 2013. And when I say digital FPV, I'm talking about what DJI did on the Phantom 2 and then the Phantom 3 and the Inspire 1, which was Lightbridge. It was all FPV, it just wasn't an air unit and a set of goggles. That doesn't mean, though, many of us weren't flying FPV at the time. Many of us were flying with goggles attached to those aircraft. The DJI remotes actually had a HDMI output option available as well. And I was flying FPV on Inspire 1s and Phantoms a very long time ago, and digital FPV has been around for a while. However, when we're talking about digital FPV that we can use in our quads, 5-inch, the first system was actually by a company called Amion, and it is called the Prosite HD. Now, for those who don't know what it was, it looked like this. And just to give you an idea, this launched in 2015. 2015, this launched. Now, this is the version 2 that you're seeing here, which consisted of a ground-based receiver. We had the transmitter module, and then you had their custom cameras. Now, this system supported 720p 30 frames a second, although they did add 720p 60 later on, or at least a 540p 60 in firmware. It could be powered. It had HDMI output from the display to go to your goggles. It had a built-in OSD system that worked with Mavlink and a few others. Very much like the DJI custom OSD in the first system. It wasn't an MSP DisplayPort OSD. It was a fixed OSD, just like we had on the V1 DJI system. And overall, it was a rather interesting product. Now, from a power output point of view, I believe the maximum RF was 200 milliwatts on the Amion system. And for me, the interesting thing is how and where this came from and where did it go wrong. Now, believe it or not, this system is based on the same theory And I mean theory as the encoding method as HDZero uses today, which is joint source channel coding. Now, this is a very, very complicated subject, but the very basics are between what HDZero and Amian was doing with Prosite and what DJI and Avatar are doing is the way they encode the image on the transmission side and down receiving side. So, for instance, if you imagine the very basics are you have a video image that is being streamed at, say, 30 times a second. If you were to transmit that full image as it came, it would probably use hundreds of megabytes of data a second. You'd need probably 200-300 megahertz of bandwidth to do it. So the first job in any transmission system like DJI and Avatar HD is to reduce the amount of data in the image. And this is compression. And this is what we use in JPEGs. This is what we use in everything. And what you're doing is you're taking out bits of the data that you don't need and leaving just the bits that you do need. So the first stage in all of the compression-based systems is taking the data out. Now, you imagine you take it out to, I don't know, 20 megahertz of bandwidth worth, let's say 20 megabits a second. If you then just stream that data over the air, it would look great when the image is in full range, but when the image broke down, the signal would just stop. And what you then have to do is bake in error correction. And this is the second part. So you have the channel coding and you have the source coding. The source coding is taking the image and breaking it down. The channel coding is adding in error correction, which is how can we make this image reappear if we lose some of the data? So what you actually do in an encoding process, the normal encoding process, separate source and channel coding, is you take out as much data as you can, and then you put some back in to allow it to be robust over the channel, which is either the cable or the wireless system. But the two are not linked. And this is why when DJI breaks up, you don't get this linear dropout of image, because in the source coding, you're taking the image and mixing it all up, and then you're taking that bit of data and mixing it all up, and then you're sending it over the air. The problem is when you lose some of that data, that bit you've lost doesn't directly correspond to a specific part of the image. It corresponds to a chunk of data that makes up that whole image. And as a result of it, when it breaks up, you lose a chunk of the image. Whereas what Carl and Amian are doing is what they call joint source channel coding, which is they don't take two steps. They bring this source and channel coding into one. And what you end up actually doing is putting in different priorities, different compression levels for different parts of the image. So you actually don't fully compress the image like you do. You break it into different bits and you say, right, the luma, I'm not going to encode, just send it as it is. That's the base brightness and the detail of the image. And then you separate off, say, the color detail, and you heavily compress that. So, because how important is the color detail compared to the luma on the greens? Well, the luma and the greens are what provide the base of your image. You can build a black and white image from luma and greens. What you can't do, though, is base color. But if you're willing to accept that you highly compress the color, but you want the luma, you do it that way. And that's how HDZero and the others work at a very basic level. You're taking bits of the image, you're breaking it down, and you're putting different compressions and priorities on different elements of the image and streaming that out. And you're not worrying about having it all mixed up. And because it's not all mixed up, when the image actually falls apart, you don't get this huge breakdown. You get this breakup of individual pixels because the data is being streamed. So the luma is just being streamed, for instance, straight out. So that's the very basics. So Amian were using this technology in 2015. Now, they entered the FPV market in about early 2016. And they pushed on with Prosite and they released multiple cameras. But what's really interesting is when we look at this, this system came out 3 to 4 years before anyone else. Yet today, it doesn't exist. And I remember when Prosite came out and they delivered the product, and there are some quite good videos out there. Rotor Riot have a full video on Prosite HD. So if we have a look, Rotor Riot have a full review. Flight Test have a full review. Prosite HD, Rotor Riot. Oh, God, wait there. Rotor Riot have a video on it. I found it the other day. Where is it gone? That's not how you spell Site HD. Sorry, here you go. So Rotor Riot actually have a video on this as well. And let me just find the flying. Here you go. So here's Prosite HD here. Oh, no, actually, let's get to some of the first flight footage. Here we go. So here's some of the first flight footage. And actually, it's quite interesting because when you look at this, it behaves a bit like HDZero, but it also has some real... Oh, where's the bit where they show a lot more of it? They keep cutting out of this. It does have a bit more blocking compression as well. Look at the goggles back then. It's typical Rotor Riot video. Give us some bloody flight footage and stop messing around. Right, thank you. So here's the... Stop talking and show me the flight footage. Typical Rotor Riot video. But look, it is interesting. It does break up a bit like HDZero, but it also blocks more than HDZero. But it's similar. But look, this is 2016. This is full digital in 2016. Look at the goggles. Look at the goggles back then. Too much talking for me. Bloody Rotor Riot videos. There was also Flight Test had one as well. Got to get past the advert. So Flight Test showing you it there too. Wait a minute. Have I gone past where they were showing? Right, here we go. Here's the footage from Flight Test. So the quad goes. So here you can see. Now, I'll be honest. Analog looks worse today. It still looks better. This must have been crazy. That antenna, oh yeah, because it's 2.4 gigs as well, this is. Oh, that was LSD mode there. But I'll be honest, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. 2015 and 16, guys. It's incredible, really. You know, it must have been mind-blowing to shift to this from analog back then. Imagine, and we know what analog's been like for so long. I don't know what resolution I'm in. I'm in 1080p, 60. I like the cut of breakup versus HDZero. It is cool. It is interesting just to see it and how it looked. But I'll just let it. It's not bad, is it? It's not bad at all. Let me just stop the playing. Now, I remember back to this time, and there was a lot going on, and Amion and Prosite had a lot of problems. Oh, Lightbridge. Yeah. But the range. Lightbridge from back then, completely different. 100%. Now, I remember some stuff back then, and my understanding is Amion weren't supporting people very well. They had a lot of problems. They introduced a new camera halfway through the product's release. They had a bandwidth limit, I believe, of 20 megahertz, and the new camera was over that, and it was causing some problems. But what actually killed this was Amion didn't support it very well. They didn't help the people. There were a lot of problems. But then DJI released the OcuSync FPV system. Now, for those who don't know, and here's the interesting thing, it'll be my video that comes up as top on this. I know this. When you go on YouTube, on Google and search for the DJI OcuSync system, it is my content that comes up at top. And for those who don't remember, this was the OcuSync FPV system. Now, this is my later video, and when they released the V2 goggles, this isn't... Yeah, this isn't the original video. DJI OcuSync FPV. Let's find the original video. Where's the early one? Where's the original? It's got to be here somewhere. It's not that one, because that's the one showing you. Here it is. The Racing Edition system. So then this came out in 2017. Now, for those who don't know, this is one of my videos going back then. It looks better than it does today. This was the Goggles RE, and this was DJI's first attempt at an FPV system. So what you had, let's just get through. You had the OcuSync Air unit. Now, this was actually based off the lead core chipset. You can see it there, SD card slot. She is big. Had a USB-C port for the camera, right? But it wasn't USB-C. It was a DJI custom port. And then you had the camera, which is this thing here. Now, this was a proprietary camera, shock horror, being DJI. This system could actually do 720p, but it was better at 480p. And that gives you an idea of the camera compared to one of the run cams. This is Mr. Hands, and the camera just plugged in there. It was a really short cable on the camera. I remember that. And then it came with loads of different antenna options. And this came out in 2017. And the amusing thing about this was it's not USB. It's got a USB-C port, but it's not USB. It's some DJI protocol. MMCX on the camera antennas. Nice to see I got that in focus, isn't it? I published that. Wow. There we go. We got the MCX in focus, but the E unit wasn't. Well done, numbnuts. That's helpful. It's just the lead core SoC back then, but yeah, it's not. It's some DJI bloody protocol. Look at the antenna on the Goggles RE. These goggles... Oh, I got to watch an advert on my own channel. There we go. And you could actually plumb your RC through it because it had a separate RC channel as well that you could do via the trainer port. And they included... Oh, we're out of focus again. Oh, we're back in. Bloody Canon. I remember the camera. And that was the menu system. But this was 20 head tracking. It did have head tracking. You are correct. Yes. That's the wiring for anyone who remembers. It was a good system. And you configured it in Betaflight. And yeah, that gives you an idea there of the size. But it did clamp onto your head. The goggles did. Oh, look at the image quality. See, there's the image quality. The image quality, that's in 960p. So you had 960, 480. It looked all right at the time. Oh, something's going up and down. And then you had wireless settings, auto and manual. Very funny. Very funny indeed. But yes, so this came in 2017. And from what I understand is, Amiens had gone very quiet. They hadn't really... they developed the system. They'd introduced a few big firmware updates. And Oscar Liang actually still has a very good post on his site. And he talks about receiver issues. He talks about no parts support, transmission and quality, the antenna mount, low light. The price is the issue in the end was the price is too high, no spare parts available, the image quality in low light. Mind you, DJI, anyone? Let's see how many parallels there are to DJI today, all right? The price is too high, right? O3. Lack of availability of spare parts. Tick. Need to work on the image quality in low light. Low light. Tick. No option to change regions in their system. Tick. A broader setup possibility for advanced users. DJI. Tick. OSD. Make it smaller and more durable. Yes, please, DJI. Can we have it a bit smaller? Single board, please. And reduce lag in HD mode. It'd be nice if you could take O3 down. And the latency issues. Yeah, the latency in HD mode was high. There was a big update in March 2017, apparently. And there's a new mode called H+, which was high quality plus. The latency wasn't terrible on it, as I understand it. It was just that it wasn't great in the very high image quality modes. But we can forgive that in 2017. Image quality is noticeably better. You had to change the lens to get the best from the new mode. That's interesting. We've seen that on HDZero with the 1080p mode. History repeating itself. And slight improvement in the HQ latency, which now seems slightly better. But unfortunately, once you start racing like a pro, you will definitely notice it. Yeah, and the latency was, in the HD best quality mode, it wasn't great. But then Amiens pretty much vanished towards the end of 2018 and 2019. And the real nail in the coffin for this was the release of the DJI FPV system we had today. What is interesting in all of this, though, is the fact that there was a system in 2015 and 16 that started the digital revolution, yet it faded away within 3 years. And it just goes to show that being first to the market doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win. Today, Amiens don't make any FPV systems. They do still exist, though. They still make chipsets. What's also interesting in their chipset is that it was their chipset. They were having their own hardware in this, even back in 2015 and 16, I believe. But, yeah, it's just funny. From Oscar's review, it seems like it had all the problems of both HDZero and DJI. It is funny when you look back at the issues and see how many of them we have today. There was something that did make me chuckle as well on RC Groups when I was going back through some old posts on this, because I might do a proper video on this. And And it was that everyone was bitching and complaining because you had to buy a set of goggles to use the DJI system, and everything else had a receiver module. And it's funny, however, today we all just accept that you've got to have a set of goggles to go with your system. It's just quite funny. It just... It would be cool to see HDZero do a priority based on distance from the center. Yeah, like a focus mode in HDZero would be cool. That definitely would be cool. A focus mode. Like the DJI one. And it's worth remembering, Avatar HD's focus mode is complete garbage. Doesn't work. DJI is the only system that has a focus mode that actually works. Amaway had a digital system too. Unreleased. Stu from UAV Futures got one and caught the first... And it caught fire the first flight. Digital systems in their history. I am thinking of doing that, yeah. I forgot... I never forgot about Prosite, but I forgot it made some real attempts... Is Tredek using the same tech as DJI? Tredek? Who's Tredek? Tredek, who are we talking about? In FPV. Tredek. I might be being dull. Someone wants to enlighten me. Ah, sorry. Yeah. I know what you're talking about now. I don't know, actually, what they're using. I have no idea. Yes. AVI makes a very good point, which is the problem with focus mode on HDZero is the system has no buffer to allow spending more time transmitting the center side. Yeah, and it doesn't even really hold the image because HDZero is just streaming in. There's no, as he said, there's no buffer there. You've just got, you know, the base data just coming in and being sent to the goggles. It's just moving through. So if you don't get it, you lose the image. I don't know what's in Tredek's receivers. I don't know. I think they're probably more Wi-Fi based. If I was a betting man, I'll be able to tell you. Tredek Ranger FCC ID. Tredek wireless video module. Let's see if there's any images. Let's have a look. So we want Tredek LLC. Go away. Let's have a look. Tredek wireless transmitter module. Is it this one? Let's have a look. If it's these ones... Ooh, that's interesting. There's not a lot of documents on their website. Is this the one we're looking at on the external photos? And that's an internal photo. Can we see the names on the chipset? I would say it's Wi-Fi based. Oh, no, it's Amian. Look, it's Amian. Ha 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 ha. So Tredek are using Amian's tech. Ian, have you seen the world's cheapest VRX with H.265 compatible and goggles you've been open IPC? I have, and I still think it's a complete bunch of nonsense. I will say it again. Open IPC, I see no future in it for FPV at all. End of. No, not at all. Can I put a race version 3 VTX on a little whoop like the modular 7HD? Yeah, you can put anything on it. Why? Because there's not remotely enough processing on board for anything. Not even budget. Complete. Look, it is going to fall over. Could OpenIPC do something for wireless CCTV? Yes. Fixed point to point? Yes. It is not got any form of link robustness, any form of video processing that is really going to be anything but on or off. It is the risk with this system is going to be that you'll have an image and then you won't. It's not Open HD though. That's the problem. OpenHD is moving towards their own hardware design right now, which is different, and we're going to see more on that. The interesting thing with OpenIPC is what they're doing is trying to run the software stack on the camera's existing ISP. So they're using a camera with an ISP built in, a very low-level, low-power ISP. I will fundamentally say, as an FPV product, in my opinion, there's no future in it. I have good hopes for where OpenHD ends up, but other than, you may as well use Wi-Fi. You just may as well use Wi-Fi. You just may as well. You're not solving any problems with OpenIPC. Sending wireless video is not the problem. We can send wireless video today. We can send wireless video over LTE. We can send wireless video. You can stream wireless video over any data link. But the VTX is 14 quid. Is it though? It's the VTX is a Wi-Fi adapter that you're attaching straight to a camera. It's not really a VTX. The receiver module is a board which was designed... I can't remember what it was designed for. I did see it the other day. It was designed for some purpose. If you want to mess around with something for weeks to get it working, that's fine. That's not a consumer product. There are loads of different little projects out there that you can stream wireless video. Is it interesting that you can... It doesn't use the Wi-Fi protocol, but it is still bound by the same hardware limitations that the Wi-Fi... A Wi-Fi chipset cannot do what DJI and Avatar or HDZero are doing. That's the bit not to get confused over here. There is no amount of software that is going to allow you to turn it into a complete open SDR. A lot of what Wi-Fi does is baked in hardware. It's not the Wi-Fi protocol, but it is the basic Wi-Fi waveform, because the hardware has been designed to do that as it comes. Remember, it's a piece of silicon that is designed to do a specific task. And you can write the software to say, oh, it's not Wi-Fi. It's still, in essence, a Wi-Fi based system. Any system, look, could it produce an image? Could it send one over the air? Yes. I can do that with a smartphone and a webcam. I can do that with a Raspberry Pi. I can do that with any number of systems, one way or another, if you want to. Sending wireless video isn't hard. What's sent DJI's 3G modem in his house? No, it's LTE. But it's a complete open DSP that they have access to. Don't underestimate the differences. It is enormous. It is like, here's the real difference, right? OpenIPC is like buying a Barbie. Yeah, right. OpenIPC is like buying a Wendy house or a doll's house for your kids. You can redecorate inside, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. What DJI are doing is like having a house built of Lego. They have literally taken every block back out and rebuilt it back in the way they wanted it to be. And that is the fundamental difference. There are lots of ways to stream wireless video. Streaming wireless video isn't the problem. Streaming wireless video at ultra low latency, reliability over long range, that's hard. That's really hard. The camera DSPs, look, where it will shine is in a very low cost point-to-point video with little variability. I wouldn't be shocked to see a bunch of the Chinese CCTV manufacturers rip it off and start using it because they don't have to license it then. They'll just use it. But when it comes to a noisy channel system, and what I mean by channel is the airwaves. You're going to struggle. The Raspberry Pi in OpenHD is doing a lot of important work. It is. And look, the interesting thing what they're doing at OpenIPC is taking out the need to use an RPI. That's really all you're doing, is taking out the need to use a Raspberry RPI. You're running it on the DSP on the camera. So the camera's DSP is being reprogrammed to do the image processing and encoding on board and stream that straight out to the Wi-Fi adapter, and then you have a custom firmware on the Wi-Fi adapter. But again, so anyone who's hoping for an Express ELRS version of HD video, I don't think it'll ever happen. I just don't think it will. To do this well costs lots of money. And that's why Carl spent huge amount of money. That's why DJI spent enormous amount of money. And that's why Cadex have gone and bought a system off the shelf. Yeah, cutting out the PI lowers latency and cost. Yeah, you save it, especially the prices PIs have been. It's saving a part. Yeah, OpenIPC at 2.4 gigs. Look, if you want to fly in a straight line and then turn around and come back, it may have a very limited use case. But other than that, I just don't see it. They can get their hands on a proper... Yeah, ask FPV Blue. He had a lot of support and it failed. Yeah, like if we look here, like, you know, look, we've got the videos. I've been keeping an eye on it. I've been watching them, but again, I see nothing exciting here at all. So let's have a look. What we got is, and remember, look, the FPV side of it. This person is not the project. This person is someone who's on the side of the project. So let's have a look. You know, look, let's just look at that. You know, if we're going to talk about, let's just have a look. So look, that's garbage. Avatar level of compression. Actually, that's worse than Avatar. I'll say that. Yeah, but you could get 100 milliseconds over an LTE connection via cellular. There's a lot of compression there. A lot of compression. There's much better examples today. What we got today? Let's have a look. Is it by Mario? Is it? Let's have a look. 5 hours ago. Oh, there we go. Let's have a look. Oh, yes, they've definitely improved the detail. Ish. Interesting. It almost looks like it's got a compression spot exactly where Avatar HD has it. Avatar HD, right, always has this compression, right, in this area here. Every time. I don't know why. But has he got a smudge on his lens there? Because, look, if you look over this side, the detail looks fine. If you look at this side, it looks garbage. Oh, it's better than analog. Is there a smudge on the... Oh, that's some form of compression as a result of the bars, I'm guessing, is it? Actual video feed in my goggles has much better quality. We always say that with digital FPV. Lacks color detail, but that's not surprising. You generally do when you're trying to... H.264 or H.265 modes. Nice. They're using both compression options over the ear. Nice to see. It looks okay. They definitely need to sort this. This is, it looks to me based off the OSD. The software is fully open source. The question is, and look, what will develop on any of these things? Now that's cool. Now put something between you and the quad. Yeah, yeah. Flying above you is, what's the, is he got a latency readout on it? I can't see. RSSI, distance. Yeah, where was he? Let me just go back to the start. So I just want to see at the start where he is. So he's by whatever that is there. There's a big triangular mud bit. So is he there then? I think he's by there, if I'm right. I can't see if there's an arrow. Yeah, he's there, isn't he? Yeah, there he is. I thought he was. So he's on the edge of that corner there. I'm just trying to see where he's going. Oh, let's just wait for the advert. So he's now, that's the furthest I've seen him go. So at this point, he is there, if I'm right. He is on that corner there. Not really seen any, there's no real distance there. I think we need to understand what it's like when you put something between it. Ooh. Did you see it compress up on the rotate? Yeah, Lightbridge could, look, did you see with it? Let's see with it. That looks fairly decent. Ooh. Oh yeah. It recovered quickly from it, but ooh, not used to seeing that. Is that an F450? Yeah, the compression is lagging. I can see it as it's moving through. Ooh, yeah. It's not terrible, but we have proof the earth is round, not flat. Yeah. Where is he compared to this is what I want to know. Can you see the jerking kick in, flame wheel for the win? Could you see? I don't know where he is because he's changed location and not shown his position. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Very Avatar-y like compression and DJI V1. Very similar, actually. You get that blanket of compression out the front. It's more of a staggering compression. I'm negative because I'm really simple. Anyone who has to F around with something for 3 hours to get it working, it's not viable. If someone makes some hardware, then I might be interested. It's easy to turn around and say 14 quid, but 14 quid in 3 hours of pissing around is a lot of money. It's not 14 quid, it's 14 quid and 3 hours of pissing around. Or 2 hours or whatever it is getting the software working. That's the real cost of this. So what could be interesting is if someone can deliver an off-the-shelf piece of hardware, then let's see how that performs and if it's worth it. And at 14 quid, no, probably not. Especially if they've got to make dedicated hardware. Remember, as a DIY project, okay, so if you think about the transmitter, the camera might be $30. Well, why is the camera $30? Because hundreds of thousands of them are being sold into FPV. Into CCTV. Then you got the Wi-Fi adapter. Wi-Fi adapter. The Wi-Fi adapter is that cheap because thousands of Wi-Fi adapters are being sold into PCs. If you're going to start then talking... Sorry, I've lost my shoe. If you're going to then start talking about how do I turn this into a product... that was the most recent video there. That was published 5 hours ago. So if that is that not the most recent? Because that was 5 hours ago. If we saw, say, a $30 receiver and a say $30 VTX and a $30 camera, so 90 all in, then you sort of say, right, what am I getting for that $90? Let's say a $30 camera, $30 VTX, $30 receiver. So for people with a set of HDMI goggles, so what system are we comparing it to there at that point? Well, we're talking really HDZero and Avatar HD with the VRX module. The HDZero and Avatar VRX module is about $200 off the top of my head, £200, $200. You're talking, I think, what's the minimum entry price to Avatar HD and DJI is probably about... Avatar HD and Walksnail is probably about 300, 320 off the top of my head. I'm guessing you could do it for 320. So you'd be talking 320 versus, say, $90. So you're saving $210. For that, if there's off-the-shelf hardware and it just works, okay. But it's then... what are you losing for that $90? AVI has just said, my understanding is that OpenHD uses the extra processing power to encode more robust video transmission. It's worth chatting to the guys on OpenHD Discord to find out more. Yeah, and look, there's a reason why Avatar HD, DJI, HDZero are all using their own ASICs largely because this stuff is hard. I am not saying there are not ways to transmit wireless video. There are loads of ways to transmit wireless video today. Wait till 5G really lands. You'll have ultra-low latency and you'll be able to just stream video. There are lots of options. But what makes something viable is very different than what makes something possible. Have you seen the guy that flies to the neighbour's island using LTE wing? No, I haven't. And that, look, I've seen nothing here exciting. It's an open source project that looks like it's going to do... If you want to faff around as a DIY project, brilliant. I think yeah, go for it. But I always look at what's in it for the end consumer. What are we going to see an Express ELRS type of FPV project? I'm really not sure. I doubt it. It's really hard. It's just so hard. They are both based on Wi-Fi. Why am I more positive on OpenHD? Because they're going down the road of their own custom hardware route, is why I'm more positive on OpenHD. And they have hardware in the game. I understand where they're able to leverage some benefits. They're still basing it largely off a Raspberry Pi or some form of processor to do the encoding. They're doing encoding. The bit I don't firmly believe will work well is being able to... Now, this could change in the future where you get better cameras. They're not produced. They've been working on their own hardware design for a while. They've been using Raspberry Pi, but they have been working on their own hardware design for a while. I haven't looked at it in some time, but I do know they were aiming on moving into their own VTX. An open source VTX design. But it is going to cost more. It costs more because it's needed. You can't... There is bits here that are needed. That's the bit. They have a new dev team, OpenHD, who've been rewriting most of the code. They're far from dead, but they had to basically... Start again is somewhat of a right term. The dev went, but someone else has taken over. So OpenHD has been working for a while on their own sort of VTX standard, which, like it can still be based off the RPI chipset. That a lot of people are doing that now. You're seeing a lot of people... An open source project for HD is designing their own hardware. Yeah, and... Yeah, it'll always be... I believe it's still going to be Wi-Fi. Yeah, there's no great fundamental change. At the moment, what's the difference between OpenHD and OpenIPC? The very simplest way to understand the big difference between OpenIPC and OpenHD is... OpenIPC is running the software stack on board the camera's ISP. So there are specific security cameras out there that have more processing on board than most normal cameras. It's not great. It's not huge. It's not like having a DJI P1 on the back of the camera, but there is an ASIC on there that gives a bit of processing. And that's how these CCTV cameras are able to do a bit more. They can do some like object tracking, and they can do controls and stuff on board the camera. So there's a low-level processor directly on board the camera, and that is being rewritten and new software put on it to run the wireless video link between that and the Wi-Fi adapter. Whereas OpenHD has to have something in the middle, which is the Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi is acting like the camera interface, is acting like the main DSP, and it's handling the software stack. Cyberdeck Calf. Yeah, we've seen this. It's something I need to order and have a look into. I don't know where they've got them from. Scans a bando and gives you an option menu for auto tricks. Do you know what? AH4 quad's sake, I always said I was shocked DJI never had a button on the FPV drone that automatically did flips. I was always shocked they never had a button that did auto flips. You know. Now, I'm not saying OpenIPC cannot be as good as OpenHD, and I'm not saying it might not end up as a project that looks interesting. You've also got to take into account OpenIPC is not an FPV project. OpenIPC is a project to run software directly on board the cameras. There is an FPV element of it that is being shown here. But OpenIPC in itself is not an FPV project. Yeah, pop it in and I'll put it up now. It's not. There are spears off the side of the OpenIPC project, and FPV is one of them. Just woohoo, finding. If you put it in the live chat, link on Discord. Let me just. Just wait for that. And people may think I'm being down on it. I've just seen nothing. Look, here's the reality. Nothing I have seen in OpenIPC is new. OpenHD showed this ages ago. Nothing here is new. The only bit of it is new is that you haven't got a Raspberry Pi in the middle. But other than that, a FPV system based on some hardware isn't really new. I'll get excited when I see a finished product. I'm tempted to order and build one and put it through its proper paces. And see how it is. He's got the hardware listed on here. Wait a month before you order and build. The problem is, I'll rip it apart because it's still open. It's still early days of the project. That's the problem. And so, look, the bit is it's not new. This is the bit. That's why I'm not excited. It's nothing here new. Nothing here new. Should it open IPs? Yeah, but who is waiting? Okay, so this is an interesting point. Right. Should wait for the new hardware. OpenIC is close to selling a pre-finished camera. Are we sure that's OpenIPC? Because as far as I know, the FPV project was a spear off the side. Is it OpenIPC or one of the devs? Because this is the bit that starts getting murky. It's a user. Thought so, yeah. I want to see more people trying it. Yeah, now in theory, Dev, is it the Mario FPV person then? One focused on cameras and home use and another for FPV, yeah. No, he's just a user, okay. Yeah, well, there's some hope then, based on what I've heard, if that's the case. Is it all still in Russian, or is there a lot more in English there now? Last time I checked, there was a lot of it in Russian. scanning bodies. Yeah, have you... It's all becoming more English. That's good. It was a lot of Russian when I looked a few weeks ago. I was like, ooh, okay. Right, before we finish up, let me find one thing. Has anyone got the link for this O3 camera? Just waiting. I've seen it, but it's been translated as well, has it? That's good news. It was all in Russian when I looked last. Look, here's something. If they have their own hardware that they bang out, which is nice and cheap, and then loads of people suddenly start using it and it's okay, then great. But DIY solutions alone are not great. You know, it needs something. I'm just looking on AliExpress, but I can't seem to find this. Are you on... Is it on AliExpress, did you say? Oh, you don't have me on Discord. Use... Yeah, I was looking on my phone. It wasn't even the GitHub I was looking for. I was looking at the chat rooms. Is it on AliExpress? Camera chipboard lens for Avatar. Camera chipboard. Aerial filmmakers. That's some name. So AliExpress. Cyberdeck. Wait there. I've added you as a standard moderator. Right, I've added you as a moderator. See if it'll let you post the link. Because I'm on AliExpress and I can't find it. See if it'll let you post the link now. Hey, there we go. Brilliant. Right, here we are. So, camera chipboard lens, Avatar, chipboard for Avatar, lens, perfect accessory, aerial filmmaker. Wow. What a name. What a name. That certainly looks like the O3 camera. Yeah, well, that's definitely the back there. That there is the gyro. That's the gyro sensor. That's the heat pad. That's the MIPI interface. That's the image is the whole camera. What's interesting is they're not the only ones selling it. Someone else is as well. For 42. Repairman Drones Parts Store. That is interesting. I will order one. Look at the interesting. The brand name is there. That... Please, no, allow 1 to 2 centimeter errors due to manual measurement. $10,000 pieces available. Yeah, it definitely looks like the O3 camera, which is the same as the Avata. Interesting. I wonder, will it pay to the air unit? Delivery on October the 25th. That's all right. Should we order one of these? Add to cart. Failed to add to cart. Please refresh. Brilliant. Yeah, maybe they won't ship anything. Why is my AliExpress account vanished? That's weird. All right, finally woke up. Let's have a look, shall we? Now, if you got any questions, please do put them in the chat before I finish this one up. We're going to order this. And then, please check your email. AliExpress. In the junk, probably. No, it's not there. Come on. Waiting for an email from AliExpress. Doesn't look like it's coming. They've sent me a 6-digit code that I haven't received. Yeah, the export bans. Right, before I finish up, basically they've had close to no effect on the real world. Yeah, I just checked my junk. They have had an effect on some dealers. However, predominantly with regards to the effect on the end user, everything is pretty much okay. There's been no major problems at all. That's the basics of it. I just checked my junk many, many times. Right. I am going to wrap this one up here. I want to say a thank you to everyone who spent some time with us tonight. I also want to say a thank you to Dave for the super chat. Oh, we've had 2 super chats. Why didn't I get noticed then? Sorry, we've had one from WhatsApp FPV, £4.99. Thank you, Dave. And one from CB Runner for $5 as well. They didn't click up on my side. I do apologise. Thank you for them. I want to say thank you for spending some time with me tonight. I may order the bits for an open IPC build, but let's see. Let's see. Look after yourselves. Don't forget to give this stream a like. Stay safe. And I will speak to you soon. Later.